Washington called it historic, $600 billion. In May 2025, the White House announced that Saudi Arabia had committed to invest that sum in the United States, spanning energy, defense, technology, and critical minerals. The package was described as funding AI infrastructure, purchasing energy equipment from American manufacturers, aviation orders, sector-specific funds, and the largest defense sales agreement ever, valued at nearly $142 billion. By November, the headline grew. Take a listen.
600 billion, but that number could go up a little bit higher, yes, I don't know, we'll see. But we appreciate it very much. So Saudi is going to be investing at least $600 billion, and that means investments in plants, in companies, money on Wall Street, and what it really means for everybody that really counts is jobs, a lot of jobs. We have a lot of jobs, so I just want to thank you.
The White House later on said the package had increased to almost $1 trillion and arrived alongside a civil nuclear cooperation pact, a critical minerals framework, an AI memorandum, and a new U.S.-Saudi strategic defense agreement. The update added this line: future F-35 deliveries approved, and nearly 300 American tanks. Listen to the following.
But today it's a very important time in our history, because there is also a lot of things that we're working in the future. We believe in the future of the rest of America. We believe in what you're doing, Mr. President, is really creating a lot of good things and good foundation to create more economic growth, more business in America. And it will also your work for the world peace. I believe, Mr. President, today and tomorrow we're going to announce that we are going to increase that $600 billion to almost $1 trillion of investment, real investment and real opportunity by details in many areas. And the agreement that we are signing today in many areas in technology, in AI, in earth materials, magnet, etc., that will create a lot of investment opportunities.
So you are doing that now. You're saying to me now that the 600 billion will be 1 trillion.
Definitely, because what we are signing, it will facilitate that. And
I like that very much.
Independent reporting echoed the pillars. Major outlets wrote that Washington had secured a trillion-scale set of Saudi spending commitments covering nuclear energy with non-enrichment limits, critical minerals including a rare earths refinery with U.S. partners, AI cooperation tied to leading American chip ecosystems, a strategic defense agreement, future F-35 deliveries, and hundreds of U.S. tanks. They also noted the guardrail that civil nuclear cooperation does not allow enrichment. On the fighter sale itself, U.S. reporting quoted President Trump saying he will sell F-35s to Saudi Arabia, a move expected to face congressional scrutiny and Israel edge questions, as Saudi interests centered on dozens of aircraft, with timelines, training, and software access still to be defined. Meanwhile, Riyadh's Public Investment Fund says the United States is its largest overseas market. It states that since 2017, it has invested around $170 billion into the American economy through deals, procurement, and partnerships. Public equity snapshots tell a different story at first glance. Quarterly filings showed roughly $19.37 billion in listed U.S. stocks in the third quarter of 2025. That contrast matters because the real leverage usually sits off the ticker. That is, in joint ventures, private placements, supply contracts, and governance rights inside projects. Let's put things into perspective. Early in 2025, the U.S. side publicly called for $1 trillion in Saudi investment and lower oil prices. By so doing, the U.S. set the rhetorical bar months before the $600 billion announcement and the almost $1 trillion update. But here is the question that decides who actually wins. Is this about cash or control? These aren't tribute payments. They're frameworks and vehicles that deploy in stages. The number drives headlines. Governance decides power, who selects projects, how fast money moves, and which side gets a veto. The non-enrichment clause in civil nuclear is one example of an American red line. The minerals and AI pieces come with export control limits and equity terms that shape access to compute, to process technologies, and to revenue. Let's now look at the F-35 threshold. A political green light is not a delivery schedule. Production slots, pilot pipelines, sustainment costs, and congressional oversight will determine the real deal. Above all, Israel's qualitative military edge will be very consequential in influencing the final configuration. Therefore, if access is tightly gated, then Riyadh would be up to buy just a symbol and a dependence chain. If access is generous, the regional balance will shift. Either way, the process itself becomes leverage. Let's look at Saudi diversification without surrender or giving up leverage. The fund's steady investments in the U.S. back Vision 2030 priorities: AI, semiconductors, and aviation, while keeping future options open. Its relatively small public equity slice, compared to a much larger overall footprint, shows a strategy built on control-oriented holdings rather than headline stock counts. The goal isn't simply to spend money, it's to secure a seat at the table where specifications, timelines, and suppliers are decided. So who really comes out ahead? On paper, Washington can claim success. The headline numbers are up, key cooperation pillars are secured, and F-35s are part of the discussion. In practice, Riyadh gains technology pathways, political cover, and priority access within U.S. supply chains, while deploying capital at its own pace. That looks less like a one-sided concession and more like a balanced, mutually beneficial interdependence. And this is the playbook in action. It isn't obedience, it's negotiated alignment. The United States sets the guardrails: no enrichment, strict export controls, and protections for Israel's edge. Saudi Arabia accepts those limits where necessary, but extracts industrial value where possible and times its moves to maximize leverage. Other swing sovereigns will be watching closely. If Riyadh can trade access for autonomy, expect similar demands around timing, technology transfer, local build-outs, and veto rights. The real test is conversion. How much of the almost $1 trillion will turn into funded projects between 2026 and 2028? Which AI and computing pathways will make it through export reviews? What number and configuration of F-35s will actually clear Congress? And how quickly will training pipelines advance? And will the public equity share remain modest while private and joint venture stakes expand, signaling a deliberate tilt toward assets where governance, and therefore lasting influence, outlives the press release? Simply put, Washington walked away with the headline figure while Riyadh secured influence inside the system. The scoreboard may flash $1 trillion, but the real contest is about who controls the levers. Pensy. If you want more than surface numbers, if you want to understand who directs the flow, subscribe. This is Liberation Lens, and perspective has never been more critical.